The Bothell City Council for September 9th is now called to order. Please join me in the flag salute. All right, all council members are present except for Mayor Freed, who is absent and excused. All right, next on the agenda is meeting agenda approval. Councilmember Sandberg.
I'd like to add 10 more minutes to our study session on the half-acre open space discussion.
Any objections? Okay, we'll add 10 minutes to that.
And we have an hour for our study session for the capital facilities plan, and I think we should have more time for that. So
Do you have a suggestion?
I would say at least another 45 minutes.
45 minutes. Are there any objections to 45 minutes? Councilmember Lamb.
I guess I'd just maybe ask how much time each individual council member is seeking, and then we could base the timing on that.
Seems fair. Right now, I would say that we could take the staff presentation and then give an hour for 10 minutes per council member. Does that seem fair after the staff presentation, or?
I might have more questions than 10 minutes worth, but we can see how it goes.
Okay, why don't we do that? We'll take the staff presentation and then go for 10 minutes per council member after that, and then we'll readdress it at that point. Any other items for the agenda? All right, council committee reports. I know Councilmember Evans, you had an item.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to bring the council up to speed real quick on our RFA study, which Deputy Mayor Spivey and Tom and myself serve on the RFA committee, planning committee. And just quickly, we've got a draft of the current conditions report that the consultants prepared to us, kind of just what's out there in each department and equipment and locations and that kind of stuff. We've got that looking at the existing conditions type of thing. We received a draft of that. And then the planning committee is broken down, and I think I mentioned this before, into 3 subcommittees. The finance subcommittee, which Tom serves on, a level of service, facilities, and equipment, which I serve on, and Dell is on the labor and organization committee. So those committees have been meeting very regular since, I guess, August. I think we met, our first meeting was the end of August in our committee. And so these committees have been meeting and looking at in more detail to each one of those items. And it's interesting. I think the further we get into this, the more there is to talk about, and the more questions that come up, and the challenges that are in front of us. It's a very good discussion. The committees, on each committee, there's a representative from each agency that's in the RFA, so that the committee's balanced with one representative from each agency. So you're getting that perspective from those other agencies that are in there, what they see and what they're hearing about the approaches and solutions that may occur. So it's becoming very detailed. I think what we're finding is I think there's overlap between the 3 committees. Our level of service committee is, I know finance has got into that a little bit and some of those types of things. So it's been a real good process of these subcommittees looking at these various elements, and then we report back to the general committee and update the general planning committee on each of the different reports. So for example, we've looked at an org chart. What would a potential org chart look like in an RFA? What are a couple examples? And so we've gone through that and looked at that. We've looked at the existing equipment inventory. Do we need 2 ladder trucks, or do we need 1 ladder truck and a reserve ladder? I mean, I've learned a lot about it and how many engines we have and aid cars and all that kind of stuff. And what we have for reserve vehicles and things. So all of those things are being looked at in detail. There's a financial model that the consultant has prepared that we plug in elements to that financial model. If we look at different scenarios and things, and that'll give us some idea of what those costs and things are. So there's just a ton of information that we're going through, and I see it's going to continue to take us some time to plow through that. So one specific item that came up at our meeting Thursday night was, and I laid on in front of each of you, is a copy of a amendment to our current contract with ESCI that talks about a plotting station study. We have 8 stations in the potential RFA now. Do we still need 8? What if we had 7? What if we had 9? What are the better locations? That type of thing. So the consultant has come back with a scope of work, which you have in front of you there, and it would be about $4,000 to do this additional plotting or preferred station location study. And that would be shared equally between the 4 agencies, so $1,000 each agency. But the committee as a whole, I think the subcommittees and then the committee as a whole feel like this is a piece of information we need a little more detail on. And the ESCI has said they could do that for about $4,000. So that's one amendment that I would, I don't know how Del and Tom feel, but I would recommend that. I think that's an important piece we need to move forward with, and we need to put this back on an agenda for approval, or $1,000. I think our city manager has approval to approve that expenditure at that amount.
Right, I'd be approving the entire contract amount of $4,000 since that the contract's with us, but I have the approval of that value, and so if council doesn't have any objection to that type of amendment, assuming the other agencies are approving as well, I will execute an amendment of that amount.
And what happened, the planning committee at our last meeting on Thursday was going to go back to each of their individual agencies with the recommendation that we move forward with this study. So we'll meet again. Our next meeting will be September 18th, and hopefully we'll be able to have the decision from everyone. But I don't know how Tom and Del feel, but I would recommend that we do move forward with this amendment. It's information I think we need. Thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that this is fairly pivotal. On the Finance Committee, we really can't look into the foreseeable future unless we know where the stations are going to be located, how many stations we have, what the personnel are going to be at those stations, and things along those lines. So I would highly recommend that we pass this and let us get some good information and carry on the conversations that we're carrying on.
Councilmember Lamb.
So I had a question for the subcommittee or the committee members. Does this contract contemplate that the station identification or configuration would include different permutations of what we might be, like, for example, if we were to merge only with Woodinville or N10, or is it only going to be plotted with the idea that it would be a complete merger of all the entities?
I think the initial thought was, let's take our current district and look at it, but also what is the growth, what could that growth be of the district, whether it, or the RFA. If we bring in our annexation areas or other agencies come in, I don't think we're going to spend as much time looking at that potential. We realize that is an option out there, but the main focus was to look at what we have currently within our projected boundaries and what stations we have and what future growth may affect those, but really what we have today.
Okay, Tom.
Yeah, the goal is to eliminate the boundaries.
Okay.
Let's eliminate the boundaries, and if we had to build a fire department, where would we put these stations? Where would they be located? Mm-hmm. What's best for the citizens?
And do you think that will be useful, that we could use that same information if we, for example, weren't to include all the entities in this in an RFA? If it were just to be a smaller RFA, would this study be of use to that, or would we have to recommission the study again?
Well, I think we could look at some of the data that comes in, and especially if it looks to the east or it looks to the west,
Okay.
There's going to be specific station locations there.
Okay.
And I think we can use some of that same data.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys' work, and I'm supportive of moving forward.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Bill, you mentioned there was a draft of the current conditions report. Is that something that's available for other, the other council members and the other members of the comprising fire districts, their other commissioners and the members of the public to see that?
I think it's a draft, and I do think it is available. So if it isn't, we certainly can make it available to you. I don't know if that's on the website yet or not.
Maybe we can get that added to the website?
I'd have to ask the fire chief whether or not that's a report that's been disseminated yet to anybody.
Last I heard, it was going through wordsmithing. And so as soon as ESCI was comfortable with the format and the spelling and grammar, punctuation, all that, then it would be disseminable. So, but I haven't heard that ESCI is finished with it yet.
Do you have a time frame on that?
Do not.
Well, I think that if we're going to, I mean, we paid for the initial report, and if we're going to add this addendum on, I think that as the information becomes available, even if it's in its draft form, that should be for public consumption. I mean, because we as a body, we review information in draft form that the public has access to, and I would think that your planning committee would want to follow the same process.
I think we've had requests for it from the public, and so I think what they're doing is trying to get it in a format that is available in a draft that people can look at. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Any other committee reports? Oh, Councilmember Rayum.
I have no problem with the $4,000 expense. But you mentioned also the financial model. They did a financial model. Is that in draft form, or is that something we can share, or you could share with the council?
I don't have it here tonight, but the consultant has an elaborate. Bill Cushman is a financial person, I think, and he's the one who's put this model together. That he's tried to list all the potential areas where expenditures would be, and then we need to go in and start plugging in information to that as it becomes available, and so that we can start looking at this thing and from different angles. So, once we start working with it and plugging information in, sure, or I don't even know in the draft form whether it could be looked at too, but it's
okay.
very elaborate model.
So it's not like a summary report explaining the
No,
financial
no,
ins and
it's just.
outs of-
I saw it in one of our subcommittee meetings. It was just a work document that he showed us of what he would use for a budget type of thing.
Okay.
What I've seen so far, I don't think it's all put together, but like each department, there'll be, at least 30 Excel spreadsheets with the stations, when they were built, cost of the station, cost of the land, all the equipment, all the engines, the personnel, what they have in reserves, what they don't have in reserves. So it's fairly elaborate.
Okay. That was it. Thanks.
So, Mayor, I don't know if it's appropriate for a motion, but I would move that we authorize the city manager to, from the City of Bothell standpoint, to approve the additional $1,000 for this, and then I don't know if we need to authorize you to sign the entire
I don't think it's needed.
$4,000 document, whether that's appropriate at this time.
You can do it in that manner, or simply if I don't hear any objections and I've heard positive feedback, I'll just
Okay.
execute the agreement with
I
them.
think that's enough to move forward with.
Great. Thank you.
Are there any other committee reports? All right. Well, no other committee reports. Then we'll move on to our first agenda item, which would be midterm vacancies for interviews for Planning Commission. So as we have historically done, we don't stop audio recording, but we do stop video recording for this. So is there a motion to stop video recording?
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Lamb and seconded by Councilmember Agnew. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Study session to discuss whether a monument in recognition of community members that have served in military, police, and fire departments would be appropriate. Also, at that time, there was a brief discussion that the park could possibly be named Freedom Park. So I'm here to ask council to receive the report that was provided and to give direction to staff.
Are there any questions of staff at all? Councilmember Sandberg. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Evans.
So, Pat, you mentioned that we have memorial parks, Park at Bothell Landing. We have a couple areas there. And then Lieutenant Madrozo Park is another one that we'll be having a memorial at. I'm not sure we can have too many memorials. I think it's important to honor those who've really served. So I support that. I'm not sure if we give credit to it by spreading them out over several places in the city, or if there's an advantage to doing one nice memorial somewhere. So the one at the Park at Bothell Landing, that one will be expanded or moved or whatever as part of the expansion of Park at Bothell Landing, and what will happen to it down there, do we know?
So the master plan leaves that memorial where it is, but as part of the council review of the master plan, it was requested that we look at enhancing it when we get to that section of the park for redevelopment. So there was no design or anything at that time.
Okay, and so the other one, there's one there that I think some elementary kids did for the 9/11 one. That's a small.
It's small. It's two columnar trees which represent the Twin Towers,
Yeah.
and then it has a plaque and some flowers and landscaping that they planted around it.
And so what do we anticipate will be at Madroza Park?
Again, we haven't designed a memorial, but there is a location in the master plan for a memorial to go in.
So how extensive that is, we don't
Right.
know at this point, or what it will be. And the one at the Half-Acre Park, do we have any idea of has there been any design work done or anything in that area for that one down there, or for something in the Half-Acre Park?
Not for this type of memorial specifically. The design is in your packets. It's at 60%. There's often been talk of some kind of either a light or a tall column, maybe a clock tower that would draw people down to Popkini. But at this time, that hasn't been designed into the project.
So what we see in that current design is mostly plaza area, landscaping, and then view area of the creek and that type of thing is what looks like that drawing represents now.
Correct.
Okay. Of the cost of that park there, the Half-Acre Park, about $1.7 million is what's on the CFP worksheet. I wasn't clear, maybe this is more a question in the CFP discussion, of how much of that is stormwater funds and how much of it is funding that was collected down there as a result of downtown development.
So the Horse Creek portion is everything within the walls of the creek, and the creek, that falls into the Horse Creek budget. So part of the 13 million or 15 million, whatever it is, that portion will be reflected as part of the Horse Creek budget itself. The budget for the Half-Acre is everything around that. So it's the plazas, it's the ramp up, the stairways, the illumination, the plantings, the trees, that sort of thing.
Okay. So essentially what we see in blue here on this drawing is going to be with the Horse Creek, and the rest is going to be the park development. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
Hey, Pat, thanks for your presentation and also for this. The question I had after I finished this and listening a little bit to your responses, is this something that you need council direction on at this point, or is this something that was because council had initiated the idea of naming it previously, you're bringing it back at council direction to see if we want to continue going down that road? Because so it seems like there's not, at this time, a required decision point for the building that we need to necessarily say, yes, we're all on board for what kind of memorial we would have or what the naming would be at this point. It's just that you were being respectful of the earlier request from council and wanting to get our feedback on that.
Correct. The design is scheduled in the CFP, the proposed CFP for 2015 to go to the
Okay.
next phase of design.
So if we were able to get back to you before that time on what we wanted for design, and does this budget include a memorial or some sort of a
Not really a formal memorial. It doesn't include the clock tower.
It doesn't
idea. It
include
doesn't
that.
go into
Okay.
that.
So if we wanted to,
additional
it
funding.
would be additional funding for that. Okay. I also, I mean, this is just one thought. I mean, I would like to see some, you know, I maybe would be more inclined to have an enhancement of the memorial that we have already at the park above the landing. And I would thinking it with this, because it represents kind of the intersection of our public school space in Popkini and the downtown and the rest of downtown Bothell, I was thinking maybe something that would be more in keeping with that. I mean, again, I think every opportunity we can to honor those who served is good and appropriate. I also don't want to dilute it sort of by having it, I think almost when it's everywhere, it's nowhere. And I think I'm not sure that we necessarily need to tonight give you a clear direction on doing that. I mean, I think we could do that with naming, especially given that the budget right now is already at fairly high for the size of the park. I don't know that I'd necessarily want to add on to that. I mean, you can do things with namings of parks, and we obviously have that, but I'd be interested in getting the Parks Board involved in and maybe even reaching out to the school district and seeing, you know, if they had thoughts about potentially contributing to some sort of a monument or artistic display within the park.
Any others? Councilmember Sandberg.
So Councilmember Lamb already touched on this, that there's no identified funding for the monument, and it's not included in the CFP sheet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so you say in your staff report that already $800,000 remains unfunded. So this would be an additional sort of unfunded mandate adding to that?
Correct.
Okay. Well, if we're just going to kind of give our comments as well, I kind of share the same belief that I would like to see us expand our memorial at the park at Bothell Landing to avoid diluting, you know, the effect. I mean, and the impact. If you have that in one area, not only does it add impact to that service, but the service of military and our public safety officers, it also remembers the effort of the individuals who put the existing monuments in place. So anyway, I kind of am leaning that direction.
Any others? Councilmember Rayum.
I'm just going to pile on the. I agree with what the other council members have said about the monument. The naming though, so Freedom Park. So do we typically probably don't name parks all that often? Does it typically go through like a process with the Parks Board and then, you know, try to get some public input and that type of thing?
Correct. There's a resolution that council adopted that has a process for naming parks, and it would normally go to the park board, and then they would make a recommendation and come to council. And it kind of outlines the different criteria for naming a park.
Okay. Because I guess I'll just give my opinion of the name Freedom Park. It doesn't seem to fit into the resolution, the kind of guiding policy that we have for naming a park. So I just don't know. I guess I'm not that in love with that name. It'd be nice to find a name that followed these criteria that we already have set in place. So I think those are good criteria. That was it.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. I guess then we'll wait for further.
When we bring back the next phase of design.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next up on our agenda, we have our our CFP, I do believe.
So I'll start first, Mayor. We have a sort of a team approach this evening in terms of the staff presentation, but for the last 7 years, the city has prepared the capital facilities plan utilizing a committee of council members, park board members, planning commission members, and staff. And this process has provided much value for the city as a key financial planning tool to, of course, schedule and then construct the most important capital infrastructure improvements. In 2007, the city received the Governor's Smart Communities Award, and ever since that time, we have been moving forward and improving upon our capital facility plan document and process. The CFP committee was comprised of Councilmember Mark Lamb, Bill Evans, and Andy Rahum, Planning Commission member Mike Stahl, Parks and Recreation Board member Joanne Allen, and myself and Tammy Shackman. We met as a committee to review the proposed capital facilities plan in July, and then following that meeting, the committee has recommended the document before you this evening. The recommended 7-year plan includes over $224 million in secured project funding for debt service, park transportation, and utility systems, compared to the previous 7-year document contained over $211 million in secured project funding. And so with that as just a real brief overview and introduction, first up to sort of lead us through the document this evening will be our Public Works Director, Aaron Leanhart.
Welcome.
Thank you. So just as going back to what the city manager began with, we had a community process this go around, going back to what the direction was when the capital facilities plan process was initiated. So in April, we had a 2-week period that was open for community input. We advertised that period on the city's website and the Bothell Bridge, as well as the Bothell Reporter. During that period, we also had an open house at the Lytle House, and fairly well attended. We had staff there to answer questions about existing projects and had drawings available for projects that are included in the existing adopted capital facilities plan. We also had that opportunity to provide the community forms to provide input into the plan, and that's where I think the majority of our requests came from, was that open house. We did receive 24 requests for projects as part of the plan. The majority of those, I think about 10 of them, are really more appropriately operating programs. A lot of requests for striping, sharrows, for example, so shared bike markings for roadways is an example that came up quite a few times. We also had 5 requests for specific development items for the North Creek Forest that were in that list. Of the projects that were requested, we have added 2 to the proposed capital facilities plan. One is project number T67, which is a pedestrian crossing at Beardsley Boulevard at 185th. And there's also a new project P26, which is improvements to Blythe Park. There's very little funding included in the proposed plan, and those are primarily related to asset replacement funds that we have projected in our budget. That does allow us to be prepared to apply for grants, in particular for Blythe Park improvements in the long term. Any questions about the community input aspect of the plan?
Councilmember Evans.
Just quickly, I think you gave the committee a listing of the requests and things from the council, and there was a lot of comments on North Creek Forest, and then there was a lot of comments on Sharrows. So I'm assuming the North Creek comments came from the North Creek Alliance Group or something mostly.
Yes.
And was there a bicycle club or someone who brought the Sharrows up, or how did that come about?
The open house was on a very nice day, and it was at the Lytle House. So we received a lot of traffic from the trail, which was refreshing. There were a lot of people coming in on their bicycles that probably wouldn't typically end up at the open house. So I think that was largely a result of the location.
Okay, great.
That's my
I was just
suspicion.
curious where those came from. Thank you.
All right.
Any other questions?
The next item I wanted to speak to briefly is the maintenance and operations impacts. 2 years ago, came before you and talked about the staff effort to more specifically project anticipated costs related to the new infrastructure that's in the capital facilities plan. So this proposed plan is similar to that, where we've done that exercise again. And in this year's budget process, we're using the information from the adopted capital facilities plan, as well as our experience at the Wayne Curve project, to help inform the budget that we are proposing to the city manager for the next biennium. So I think that is it for me. Tammy.
Thank you, Erin.
Director Shackman.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm here to talk about CFP fiscal policies and update you on any changes that are being recommended. The first change actually came from the Public Works Director, who let the Finance Director know that I don't think impact fees can be used for opportunity funds. And she was right. So anyway, for impact fees for parks and for transportation, we cannot set aside the 10% for opportunity into an opportunity fund because of their restrictions. So the monies are still there; they're just not restricted into their own fund. Okay. Yes.
So we have, is it like the park cumulative reserve fund or whatever those impact fees, they go to one pot as opposed to having 10% split off to another pot. Is that correct?
Correct, because we already have sub areas that we have to put those monies into, so that we're restricted on how we allocate those monies. So we can't just say we're going to set aside 10%. We need to go by the policies that we've already set up as far as allocations to the individual sub areas.
Councilmember Lamb.
Tammy, following up on that, do we have, in some sort of easily accessible form, what sub-areas, like when we come close to losing some funds or having to give them back, do we have a trigger on that, or do we have a cascading like calendar that says, hey, we're about to lose these impact fees, or is it such a negligible amount in the individual sub-areas that it kind of doesn't factor into planning that much?
We actually look at them every year when we put together our financial statements, and we actually have to state law changed as far as the number of years that we can hold the money. And in addition, the state auditor's office changed their requirements. So now we have to report them in that manner also. So they're audited from, I guess, last year, from 2013 forward. They're audited. We actually have to show any monies that are owed to someone. So if we have a liability, let's say, we've held the monies for 7 years or whatever, and we found that we're not going to use the monies and we have to give them back, we actually have to show them as a liability on our financial statements at this point.
And so maybe you're not the right person to ask this question now, because that's the exact right financial answer to the question. I guess as an opportunity item on the flip side, when we're planning our parks and we have, we look at the capital facilities plan and we have funds that we can apply towards a particular park, do we have some kind of a system to say this amount is going away within this time and so we're going to lose these funds? Or again, is it such a small percentage? And I'm specifically referring to residential housing mitigation, where they set aside $100 for a house or something like that. And Pat, you sound like you may have an answer and may have an idea why I'm asking the question.
I do have an idea why you're asking the question. So we spent the last year auditing our books and going back through them and developing a new, stronger system so that we can address the issues of making sure we're spending the money
Okay.
when we get it, if we can. And in some cases, there's neighborhoods that just don't have park facilities that are near enough to be able to say this money can go here.
Yeah.
There's two parts to the money. The money goes to the neighborhood, a small amount, and then a large amount goes to the community account. And the community account, we have no problem spending that down.
I can imagine.
But it's those neighborhoods where we're shy of parks or don't have a park in an adjacent neighborhood that works.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Bill?
Councilmember Evans.
Just to follow up on that, my experience with impact fees is they have to be used to offset growth. In other words, they're not just to be used for general projects or where we want to put them. And I don't know if our legislation is written such that it sounds like there's a pot that can be used throughout the entire city, and then there's a pot that can be used, has to be used in a specific neighborhood where it came from. In other cities I've worked from, this size of city, I certainly support that money needs to be used to offset growth and that type of thing. That's what the legislation says. But my point is, I think any park impact or any park facility that we develop in the city of Bothell benefits the entire city. So to earmark some of that into a certain little pot here for this little neighborhood or whatever, I would argue that any park impact fees that are spent in the city benefits the city or the growth of the city. So I don't know whether we can go back and make that case through our comp plan or not, but I think to earmark it into these little pots for these little neighborhoods, the bigger benefit is any park we develop in the city benefits every resident of the city. I don't know if we could get that far or not, but that's...
So our current code requires us to split it that way, but that's in our proposed budget is to come back, that was proposed to the city manager and relook at the park mitigation in the future.
And change the code so it could...
The code,
maybe to
look at the
broaden that
whole...
use or something?
Right.
Great. I think that's a good thing to look at.
I just wanted to
Councilmember
respond briefly to what Councilor Evans said. So I agree with you. I mean, I think that generally speaking, having a broader source of funds to access is a good idea. The concern that I have, though, would be on a broader scale. Right now, I think Snohomish County is significantly under-parked. There's not most of the parks in our city are the overwhelming majority of parks in our city are in the King County portion of the city. And I'm concerned about taking mitigation money from Snohomish County, which is now a minority of the voters in our city, and using that on parks. Mitigation money from new construction in Snohomish County and taking it out of the county. That's one of the reasons on Prop 1 that it proposes building a new park in Snohomish County, because we don't have enough parks in Snohomish County, and most of the balance has been heavily shifted towards King County. So I would support that with the caveat that I think mitigation on new construction in Snohomish County, because that's where a lot of our new construction is going, should probably stay at least in that side of the border going forward. But that's a conversation we can have when that comes up this fall.
Okay, and a couple other policy changes. Annual receipts, in the past, we have said 10% should be set aside of overall capital spending, should be set aside for any cost overages that are unexpected, that type of thing. But as the projects grow or get completed, or receipts start coming in at a much higher level, when we were receiving $800,000, setting aside 10%, what we were trying to do is keep it near $1 million per year. And so that is what we changed that to just strictly say we need to set aside $1 million that we have in the capital improvements fund for any project that ends up having cost overruns or something that's unexpected come along.
Can I ask clarification?
Councilmember Sandberg.
So you said historically we put aside 10% of our REIT revenue for contingency.
Yes.
So 10% of our REIT revenue would not have been $1 million, because if we've historically gotten $2 million, then 10% of that is only $100,000. So instead of setting aside $100,000 in REIT revenue now you want to set aside a minimum of $1 million in REIT revenue.
That is correct. We actually had it accumulating in the past. So you'd set aside 10% and it would accumulate, but it got to the point where we had accumulated actually we had it overstated more than what we needed. So now we want to have, now that we've reached our goal of $1 million, we just want to cut it off there and have $1 million set aside for contingency.
So just $1 million total, not $1 million every year.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Just, yeah, to have $1 million reserve set aside for overruns. Okay.
Can I ask, is that the opportunity fund that's going into then?
It's not,
Is a contingency fund and an opportunity fund two different funds?
It actually is more of, an entity can have all kinds of different emergency type funds, rainy day funds. Opportunity funds really are more if a piece of property comes up for sale and the city really wants it and we haven't budgeted for it. It's not in the capital facilities plan. How can we pay for it? So that's what the opportunity fund's for. These funds are really more of an emergency reserve. If something goes awry, you start digging and you find you have environmental impacts, that type of thing, that we have some money set aside to complete a project. So far we've completed all the projects that we've started, and those monies are our insurance to make sure that that continues. Okay. In addition, the CFP committee is recommending that 50% of one-time 50% minimum of one-time revenues should be allocated as follows: 25% for park improvements and 25% for pavement improvements. What one-time revenues are, in our general fund, we cap what we consider to be a normal year for development revenues. That way we don't get in a habit of increasing our costs and spending at a level that is higher than what our ongoing revenues are going to be from year to year. So those one-time development costs, we actually, once our reserves are met in the general fund, then we transfer them over to the capital improvements fund. And this policy has been in place for many years, and it's really helped with all of the happenings in the downtown. It gave us that instead of adding to our operations, we set money aside to actually provide the infrastructure needed for the new development that came in. So now at this point, the committee is recommending to the council that 50% of those monies be allocated, 25% to parks, 25% to pavement improvement, and then the other 50% could be allocated however the council sees fit. So it could be 75% for pavement 1 year or one biennium, and the next biennium 25 to pavement and 75 to parks, or however the council deems appropriate at that time. Okay. And another policy, the committee is also recommending that the council establish and implement a public, I'm trying to say this exactly the way the committee agreed to the verbiage, so I'm going to read this. Establish and implement a public process to remove future project CFP number T8 39th Avenue Southeast Extension Bothell Connector from the recommended 2015 to 2021 CFP. In addition, the committee is recommending that the council establish and implement a process to determine neighboring partners' current interest participation in funding an aquatic center as described in future projects CFP P12 Regional Aquatic Center and Community Center. Does anybody have any questions about those? Okay, then we'll go ahead and Stephen Marakawa is going to discuss the transportation projects next.
Good evening. So I'm going to go through the transportation projects, and probably the best way to follow me is to use this page. and I'll actually pass this around if you want to mark it up. The way I kind of look at this, and the easiest way for me to keep track of projects is to kind of dump each of the project into a specific category, and I have kind of 5 categories. And what you might want to do, if over the next a week or so you want to look back at the projects, is on that list, maybe put a mark next to each category and define different categories, and I'll lead you along in that process. So the first category are projects. We have 4 projects, and I would put a C next to these projects. Is basically they're complete, but we do need to carry over some small amount of money in order to do mitigation work for wetlands or streams, or in a couple cases we have plant establishment periods of a year, and the contract isn't quite going to be up by the end of this budget cycle or CFP cycle. So the 4 projects are T2E, North Creek Trail Section 3, which is currently under construction, and it'll have wetland mitigation requirements extending beyond this year. T6, which is Bothell Crossroads. That's essentially complete, but we'll have mitigation requirements down by the stream as well. T7, Bothell Everett Highway widening. There's no mitigation requirements there, but the project is doing really well, coming under budget. We have a lot of grant funds, and we have the opportunity to plant trees. So we're taking the opportunity to put trees in there, and we want to put in a 2-year cycle of establishing those trees. And T38, which is the Multiway Boulevard Phase 1, which has plant establishment that will be required. So those are the 4. I put C next to them for complete. The next category, which is the largest category, you could probably put G next to it for grants. We would recommend keeping these on the list because we've been able to get grant funding. And except for the downtown contaminated soil and groundwater cleanup, which we do have grant money for, but if you're to take that out because it's kind of its own little animal by itself, the rest of it, for every dollar the city contributes, another $5 is provided by grant. So it's very good that we can leverage our local funds with federal or state funds. So the first project is T2G, North Creek Trail, Section 4. We received design phase grant funds. T41, Main Street Enhancement, Phase 1. That's working on Main Street between Bothell Way and 102nd Avenue. We've received design grant funds. T47, which is the downtown contaminated soil groundwater cleanup. We've gotten about $4.5 million in grant funding so far through the Department of Ecology. We got a little bit through the EPA. And we essentially follow the state cycle. And we reapply consistently to get further grant funding as we find new sites that need to be cleaned up or as we progress through our current sites. So again, we continue to get grant funding for that one. T48, which is the Bothell Everett Highway and 228th Street Southeast intersection safety improvements. That one is currently under design. We hope to go out early next year, and that would provide some safety improvements at that intersection. We have design and construction grant funds for that one. T54 is State Route 522, Stage 3. This is the portion between Wayne Curve, a little bit beyond Wayne Curve, because we did some work in Stage 2A up to that storage facility. This would take care of the rest of the 522 in the area that we just incorporated between Kenmore and our previous city limits. So we've received design phase funds, and we have sufficient funds to go through and complete design, and we've received this year right-of-way grant funding as well. That's T54. T58 is Northeast 195th Street Bridge seismic retrofit. It's a very small project. Our match is on the order of $21,000. It's only $150,000, but basically what it does is it brings that bridge up to a certain level. If there's an earthquake, it has a better probability of surviving. It's a fairly old bridge. T61 is 228th Street Corridor Safety Improvements, and that's being paired with T62, Citywide Transportation Safety Improvements. It's on the order of a few $700,000-800,000 total between the two, and we got design and construction funds for both of those, and that's expected to go out to add for construction early next year as well. T65 is one of the new projects. We had an opportunity. Snohomish County, I believe, is the lead WashDOT is participating, City of Everett and Snohomish County, and there's a number of signals between Everett and the City of Bothell that they want to kind of tie together and use this adaptive signal control system to kind of maximize how they're timed. And so for a contribution on our side, I think we put in something like $51,000. We participate in this couple $1 million exercise that would tie all these signals together. So we do have grant match money for that. T68, 228th and 29th intersection, that's by Canyon Park Business Park. That has always been our 6-year tip, and we were able to get design and construction money for that one as well. And I'm going to just throw that out here. It's not part of the transportation, but P24 is the bridge at the Park at Bothell Landing. And although that's part of the Park at Bothell Landing project, it's non-motorized transportation, pedestrians and bikes. And so we were able to get design funding for that as well. There are 2 projects that we're currently applying for grant funds, and we won't know through this right now whether we're going to receive grant funds, but we recommend we keep them there. T66 is a traffic roundabout in 240th and Meridian. And T67 is the one that Aaron talked about earlier, pedestrian crossing beacon at Beardsley Boulevard and 185th. I believe we've worked with the state, UW Bothell, to get some match money for that, and we're trying to get the remaining to be funded by grant money. There are 3 projects that maybe you could put a B on for bond. Those are the bond levy projects. That's Multi-Way Boulevard Phase 2. That's T39. T40 is the Main Street extension, which would basically complete our purchase of right-of-way, and then the adjacent developers would have to build the actual roadway. And T41, which is the Main Street Enhancement Phase 1. That one kind of double dips, you see, but it's on the bond levy, but if we can go and get grant funding, then we're better off. So if you've marked your sheet up, there should be only 4 projects left that don't fall into one of those previous categories. The first one is North Creek Trail, Canyon Park. And we have put a little bit of seed money in there. That's about 600 feet through the Canyon Park place where the trail is not quite up to code. And if we can apply for grant money one day, this would provide the seed money for that, and we could proceed with the project. Popkini Way, although the developers are going to build Popkini Way, we found that we've had to do a lot of coordinating with the developers. Things go back and forth, and so we put a little bit of money there, about $25,000, to help us modify designs, answer questions, and work with the developers as they build that. T57 is the Sammamish River Bridge replacement. We did put in a federal grant for that. We don't anticipate getting it, but we wanted to bring to attention of that committee and as well as the council that this is a project that is likely to need to occur in the next few years, and we want to bring it to your attention. We have a strategy for this, and what it would be is we go after what they call a BRAC, Bridge Replacement Advisory Committee federal grant, and it would pay for a substantial part, about 80% of the actual structure. And then we would try to go after state money like TIB money and pay for a part of the match so that our local part would be as small as possible. There's also approach work that every bridge needs to be done, and the BRAC does not pay for approach work. That's the work off the bridge, and there's some improvements we'd like to do there on both sides of the bridge. And so we would apply for a different type of federal grant, STP grant, to pay for that. And again, TIB would try to get that match in this whole project. So that's kind of our strategy. We wanted to submit it to the committee, the BRAC committee this year, just to get their attention. It's a little unusual situation for the bridge. The bridge is in fairly good shape. The only difference is it's on timber piles. And timber piles being an organic material, you're not quite sure how it's behaving. We can inspect it every 2 years, but if it starts to go, it could go fairly rapidly, and we want to position ourselves to be able to address that as best as possible. So you'll see that it doesn't really have funding in there for now, but we're trying to rise it up a little bit in the priority. The last one is T60. It's 185th reconstruction, and that would be between Bothell Way and Beardsley Boulevard, and that's the future identified east-west route for transit, and we know someday that's going to need improvement. We previously had listed a small amount of federal funds on that, again, to open up the possibility of getting grant funds. This one could be moved to the future list if we really want to. That's pretty much it for transportation as far as a summary. So if you have questions, I can certainly try to address them.
Are there any questions of Steve?
Do you want you want us to wait until staff is mostly done and then we can ask our questions at that point?
I think if it's the short question, the quick answers, that we'll go with that right now, and then we'll get into the deeper ones at the end. All right, there's none. Well, thank you, Steve.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome back, Pat.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to present the parks projects. In 2014, we were able to accomplish the acquisition of 5.9 acres to North Creek Forest, which is project P3. What? Yeah, wrong one. North Creek Forest, sorry, is P22. I also have news to share with you tonight that I received preliminary grant results on Friday from the RCO, and we were first in the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and that's $500,000. The only thing that could jeopardize that is the feds decide not to fund that program. Probably not too likely. So we were number one there. And in the local parks, which was $1 million ask, we are about number 7. And half of the pot of money has to go to acquisition projects. And so the staff at RCO was fairly confident we're probably going to get that $1 million as well. So a lot of credit goes to the Friends. They put together the presentation and went with me to Olympia and actually made the presentation to the committee. So it all relates to North Creek Forest. So $1.5 million from RCO is pretty certain to come in. It would be summer of 2015 before the funds are available. The other thing that we accomplished was we started,
$500,000 was coming from the Land and Water Conservation Fund?
Correct.
And then the second one, the $1 million grant?
Is the local parks WWRP.
WWRP. And that's also under the RCO?
Correct. That's state funded, and then the Land and Water is a pass-through from the federal government.
Well, great news.
Yeah. So the other one that we've taken some steps on this year is the Park about the Landing, and we were before you last week to start talking about preliminary design. That was also a WWRP local grant request, and unfortunately we did not fare so well on that one, and we were near the bottom. Mostly because they see it more as a economic development project rather than a recreational project, because it was the plaza, the fountain, and the parking lot. So I think if we go back in the future, I'd go back for the existing park redevelopment and probably be more successful. So new projects in this CFP, there's 2 that are new, which is the East Norway Hill improvements to the park that we recently acquired from King County, and that's Project P23, and that is levy funded. And then the North Bothell Park, which is P25, that is also levy funded. And then as Stephen talked about, the Park about the Landing Bridge was previously in the Park about the Landing project, and it's been pulled out as P24, and it's going to be managed separate from the Park about the Landing development. Blythe Park improvements has also been added this time. It's not levy funded, and it would begin in 2018 to start implementing the master plan. That's P26. Ongoing projects that remain in the plan are North Creek Field number 3, which is to put synthetic turf down, and that is in the levy. Open space funds for acquisition and/or development could be used for match to the forest, or for future development or acquisition of other open space. That's levy funds. Madrazo Park is partially funded from funds that we receive from King County. Park at Bothell Landing is P20, and that's levy funded in part. And then P21 is the half-acre open space that we talked about earlier tonight.
Any short questions for Pat? Bill, Councilmember Evans.
So it looks like we've pretty much got North Creek funded with grant funds.
Correct.
Well, that's not approved by the legislature yet, so
Right.
I wouldn't say that it's
Right.
been secured.
Right.
And so we still have a levy amount of $1 million, which I think is still very important to have
Right.
as part of that.
And so
I don't want to promote that that's a secured funding source until we actually, because we also have several millions of dollars in other transportation projects that could offset the levy amount too. That's not secured either.
Well, and I guess that's a general question then, because we have projects in the levy that if we're hoping we get grant funds on them, and looks like we have a good chance at that. So how does that change? I mean, can those funds, can that, so the open space acquisition development or funding, whatever we had set aside for North Creek, can that move over to more open space or
Yes, it can.
parkland acquisition?
It could also move forward. It's not just acquisition, but it's also development of open space as well.
Okay.
So those funds, I think, if awarded and if they do come to fruition, are for acquisition, and they're not for actually development of open space development, such as trails or interpretive sign. There likely will still be a need at North Creek Forest for that type of expense.
But
Yes.
do we have more flexibility with the bond funds if they're approved?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. The bond funds are for acquisition or development of open space.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that it's specific to North Creek Forest, although we've indicated that it's for North Creek Forest. We have opportunities for open space elsewhere in the city as well, in addition to actually developing the open space.
But not for active parkland
No.
purchase?
No.
So it's going to be open
We wouldn't,
space.
that's correct. We keep it within those categories.
Okay.
The other point that I would make is that we don't have, I mean, it's my understanding, Pat, is that they don't have any of the remaining North Creek Forest under contract. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't know what the price is going to be until you have somebody locked in at a price point.
Any other quick questions? All right, thank you, Pat.
I'm sorry, Pat, I did have one on, and this is I apologize, this is a timing one on the Madrozo Park. It looks like that's scheduled to be completed, or the $600,000 next year, is that correct?
So we've received the final draft of the surface use agreement from King County. We'll be coming to council in October for that. And once
Okay.
that's approved by our council and King County Council, we'll then be able to proceed with design with
Okay.
the hope to be able to build next year.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Welcome, Don.
Hi. So I'll be going over the sewer, stormwater, and water projects in that order. And the sewer projects, we have programmatic projects identified in the annual sewer main replacement category, S1. And those projects were identified in our sewer comprehensive plan. The second project listed is the Promontory Hillside Sewer Main Replacement, and that project came about with the problems on the hillside at Promontory, Norway Hill. And the third project is downtown revitalization utility improvements projects, which were identified in our downtown utility plan that we completed in 2011. Also, we have one project that we'd like to add, and I'll pass this around. It's Lift Station 3, and it's almost a repeat in a way. A project we just completed, Lift Station 2, off 102nd. There's a similar situation that's going on with this lift station 3 at near Bothell Station, and it's an older station. with a lot of problems, a lot of operations and maintenance. There's old parts that need to be replaced. It's being very difficult to maintain, and there's been a lot of problems associated with it. So it was brought to my attention by the operations crew, and we feel the need to replace that station and get going with the design and construction of it in the next 2 years. So we've added that one. Moving on to the storm projects. We have annual storm and surface water capital improvements, SW1, programmatic replacement projects, and flood mitigation projects. A lot of those were identified in the 2007 flood mitigation program, and they're also going to be reanalyzed in our surface water master plan that we're developing right now. The second one's the big one, is Horse Creek improvements, which is the bulk of the capital projects, well, the bulk of all three utilities, actually. So that's the big one. I think everybody's well aware of that project. About $12 to $15 million project that's aided by the downtown facility charges that was implemented in 2012. This third project, Sammamish River Side Channel Restoration, is a WIRA 8 project identified in their plan that will help with fish habitat, with a side channel, and riparian improvements. That project is primarily grant funded and contingent on grant funding to move forward. Then we have the downtown revitalization utility improvements identified for surface water. Blythe Creek erosion control project is a small project identified for the sedimentation impacts in that area. Queensboro watershed LID implementation is another project that would be totally grant funded if we move forward through completion. And that would be to implement low impact development in that area to help deal with some flooding issues. We're currently in the feasibility stage with that project. And then there's Parr Creek flood mitigation. This would be a small project to deal with some of the problems on 120th Street where we have flooding. And so lastly, the water capital projects. We have, first of all, annual water main replacement projects, which are identified in the adopted water comprehensive plan. In fact, all the projects listed are identified in the adopted water comprehensive plan. We have Morningside Booster Station retrofit, Penn Park Reservoir, which is currently under design, Bloomberg Reservoir painting, downtown revitalization utility improvements for the water system, and then we have a pressure zone improvement project identified with the 498 pressure zone to improve pressures in that area. And so that's pretty much it for all three utilities. On top of that, of course, we have an $18 million bond we're presently in the process of acquiring. And, of course, we had the ordinance for that approved last week at council. So that project is earmarked to help fund the Horse Creek project primarily, and for the water, the Penn Park Reservoir, and the lift station project for sewer.
Any quick questions for Don? All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to debt services and changes to debt service. The difference between the 13 through 19 CFP and the 15 through 21 CFP amounts to $18.3 million. The $18.3 million all was part of the previous CFP, but because we're moving it forward, we're adding 2 more years of debt service, including the City Hall lease payment, including the payment for the Multi-Way Boulevard, and also for a Public Works Trust Fund loan. So together, there's no new debt that was not anticipated previously. It's just that now we have, instead of having 5 years of debt, because it's just being incurred now, in the 13 through 19 planning period, in the 15 through 21, we have actually 7 years of the debt showing. So obviously, it's going to be more than the previous year. But it was all part of the plan. There's nothing in here that wasn't already anticipated. I think I've mentioned this before, but I will mention it again. We have received certification from the Department of Revenue. The city has met its obligations for LIFT, and we do anticipate receiving the full $25 million. So beginning in September of this year, the money will start being collected, which there's no increase to taxpayers or anybody who is buying products in Bothell. It is just a reallocation of the state's portion of sales tax is going to come to the city rather than to the state, and that was basically their grant to us through the LIFT, through our LIFT award. But the strategy that was used for that LIFT project, it really drove so much of what has happened in our downtown. It's such a big deal, and we pushed off issuing those bonds until the very last minute to make sure we could take advantage of every dollar that the state was willing to give us for all the improvements downtown and all the revenue generating development that has taken place. So the city has been very successful just getting that grant, that award. It was a competitive process. Lots of cities in the state of Washington looking for that money, and we received it. And not only did we receive it, but the council and staff should be, and the community should be very proud of the fact that we're the first to actually come back and be successful and ask for the state's money. So we're the first to complete our project. So that's pretty amazing.
A quick question, Councilmember Evans.
So do we have to certify that every year, or we're certified now, so we're good for 25 years?
We're grandfathered in.
We're just going to get $1 million every year.
Yes, we have
Thank you
to
very
actually
much.
provide a report annually. They re-look at the dollars spent every 5 years, but we are grandfathered in, and I have the email to prove it, which I will never get rid of. So anyway, yeah, that's just been such a success for our city, and I think we are the poster children of how successful that legislation can be. I just can't say enough about the opportunity that it gave to this city, and that we had some really wise people at the helm and that took advantage of it and saw the vision. So anyway, in addition, let's see. I guess I want to also shine the limelight on the Public Works Department. Once again, they just go out and get, and you saw in every one of the staff who came up here talked about grants. And all of these, the utilities, transportation, parks, they're all out there. They write these grants. They do such a good job, and then they, because of the great capital facilities process that we have, and the plan, and we have the dollars set aside to match the funds. We're ready to go. We've got the designs done. We kind of had it together, and we've been able to take advantage of all those grant monies that are out there. So, just to give you a statistic, in this 7-year planning period, which most of the construction and development is happening in the first 4 years of this plan. So we have $226 million of funded projects, okay? And of that money, 51% came from sources outside of the city of Bothell. So 51% of that $226 million, our Public Works people have went out and got for us. That also includes the lift dollars. But really, my hat's off to them, and I'm sure you guys all feel the same way. It's just amazing what they have done and what they brought to the city.
Tammy, I think you told the committee when we met that 42% of every dollar comes from grants. So now that's up to 51%?
That's have to be added in the lift monies.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
So, Deputy Mayor, we'll conclude the staff's presentation by simply reiterating on behalf of the CFP committee that I would ask that council authorize and adopt the capital facilities plan, which is scheduled for September 16th, next Tuesday. All the projects, with the exception of the project that was introduced by Mr. Feen tonight, have been supported by the capital facilities plan committee, and I'm assuming that that would have been too had it been available to them. But again, we're looking for your support next week.
Okay, thank you, City Manager. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll go with our 10 minutes per council member at this point, and we'll just see where that takes us. So who would like to start? Councilmember Evans. Hi, you're on the clock.
Thank you for all that information. It was great. I want to go back to the statement in the introduction back here, something that 50% of one-time revenue transfers should be allocated as follows: 25% parks and 25% revenue. Can you just, 25% pavement, right? Can you just explain briefly what that means? So one-time, 50% of one-time dollars is going to those two sources, and is that a new policy this year then?
That is the new policy. The city has always had the policy that once they, or they've had for many years, I haven't always had it, but we've always, since I've been here, been taking one-time development monies that we know are not going to be ongoing, and instead of adding those to operations, we move those monies to capital in order to support the facilities needed for the added population, the added development that's happening in our area. What's new with this recommendation from the committee is that there's restrictions being put on those monies, so that a minimum of 25% of those monies would go towards pavement improvements and 25% would go towards parks. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there was a conscious decision in putting together these capital facilities plans over the last few bienniums to really focus on the downtown and make that happen. And whenever you go strong in one area, there's other areas obviously that are maybe not going to be receiving all that they really need to receive in order to maintain certain levels of maintenance. So now is the time, after we're completing all these projects downtown that are revenue generating and going to add new operating monies to the city and hopefully one-time capital monies too, that we want to make sure that a portion of those monies are going towards items that were not receiving all they needed for maintenance during the last few years. And one of the big ones was parks and pavement. And I believe that's why the committee brought that forward. They wanted to make sure that there was money allocated directly towards those two areas.
So it's not capital dollars, it's M&O dollars that we're contributing to those areas. Is that what I hear you saying? Maintenance?
It's actually, to be very, very specific, it is construction sales tax mainly, and development revenues that come into the general fund, but we know that they're not sustainable, that they're one-time boom money, whether it's...
does that go to capital? It is for capital. Okay, that's what I want. And so if it is, where is that? At some point, if you could tell us where that's reflected in the CFP, where is 25% additional dollars coming into pavement and parks? You can give me that sometime later on, but
I can actually answer you now.
Okay.
We don't budget or speculate on any one-time monies, either in the general fund or in our capital funds, until the monies are in the bank. So as they come in at the end of a biennium, we look to see how much our revenues are exceed our expenditures, and at that time, that's when they would get allocated. Is at the end of the year, year end of a biennium.
so we're not going to see any of that money go into any of these parks or pavement until the end of 2016?
That's correct, unless there's an addendum to the capital facilities plan at the end of 2015. You're not going to know until the end of 2015 what monies come in,
Okay.
and so you wouldn't know until February, March.
But that's a source of funding for future.
It's
Great.
it's visionary
Okay.
monies.
Next quick question. City Hall lease, page 73, talks about the lease payments budgeted at $3.5 million. But then if I look at the sheet on page 73, it looks like to me the annual debt service is less than $3.5 million. Actual is only $3 million. If I read this right, $3 million in 2016 and $3.3 million in 2039. So do we just estimate 3.5 or?
Because we don't know what asset replacement for that building is going to be, or maintenance on that building, what is going to change, we went ahead and just added monies for asset replacement into the budget.
So part of that 3.5 million will go for asset replacement then? Okay. No opportunity funds this year. We've got 614,000 existing. Is that there existing now?
Yes, and we still have opportunity reserve fund for general projects. They can be used for anything at the council's discretion. So those monies will continue to be set aside as they always have been, and that fund will continue. The funds that no longer can be set aside are the impact fees, which would be in the Park Cumulative Reserve Fund and the Arterial Street Fund. But what's going into the Capital Improvements Fund, which is the bigger dollar amount, a much higher amount of revenues, will continue.
Okay.
So we will continue to add to the 600,000.
Okay, great. And that's out there for council's discretion as to how that's used in the future?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody in Parks keeping track of all this extra money that's out there that we can tap later on? Do that. Keep track of that for me, right? On page 99, the park at Bothell Landing talks about the design the entire park in 2014, 2015. I guess was that kind of our discussion the other night, where we didn't go with the entire design? I don't know. Anyway, question I have is it shows 2015-16 Gathering Plaza, blah, 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 2018 Historic and Play Equipment is 2019. One of the reasons we weren't competitive at RCO is because we didn't have park improvements per se or activities or something in there that adds value. So I'd like to see that play area moved up in that scheme if that's possible, to get that done sooner rather than 2019, if that's what this is implying, is a kind of the impression of that. So quickly. Okay, I think that's it. I think this is a good plan. Oh, I just wanted to comment on the last item was on the regional aquatic facility that the committee added, and I think that was one thing that was important to the park board that did not get in the actual levy. Obviously, and it's such a large project, or regional project, needs other consideration. But I think with the economy doing better and things, I think that's something I would like to go back maybe, I think we have an annual meeting with the school district and the 3 cities and that type of thing. That's a project at some point I'd like to go back to the cities and say, okay, things are better. It's just something now that we want to take another look at and see if there's interest in doing that project. So that's why the committee agreed to move that up and discuss that as a potential discussion with the other agencies and see where they're at, what the if there's any interest in trying to move that forward and see what that is. So that's why that particular item was added. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, very nice job. Councilmember Lamb.
Thanks a lot. I just want to follow up a little bit on the pavement and capital versus M&O. So if 25% of our construction sales tax is being allocated towards pavement, is that towards new pavement or towards maintenance of existing pavement?
It would be for its maintenance, but it's not 25% of construction sales tax. It's 25% of what gets transferred over, which is anything above the base, what we consider to be a normal year.
So it's just, but it's considered to be one-time revenue.
Yes. We see a lot of construction sales tax. Let's say a science building goes up,
right,
or a city hall goes up. We see a lot of monies coming into the city for construction.
No, and I understand where it comes from, and I understand the principle behind it. But in the past, we've said that should be spent just on capital projects, and so this would be the first time where we were allocating one-time revenues on a recurring expense, which in this case would be the maintenance of pavement. And is that just because we feel like we're underfunded in pavement, or?
These projects, the pavement improvement is actually in that whole project is accounted for within
our
capital improvements fund. It's very, very large. It's a large dollar amount, and it is those monies are actually become assets when we spend those monies. So yes.
And then one of the things that we talked about is how one of the ways the city was able to kind of manage and thrive during the recession was by setting aside a significant operating reserve. And at the Capital Facilities Committee meeting, you explained to us how we're now we're basically rebuilding those operating reserves and that we're getting close to that. And I think my understanding was you said that we'll be back to that 15% by the end of the year. Is that still what we anticipate?
Yes, I think that we will be back by the end of this year.
Okay.
Which is really 2 years ahead of when we originally planned with a conservative strategy. So keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah,
keep watching those numbers.
That's fantastic news. And again, I wanted to highlight what you had said about 51% of all funds on our capital projects coming from outside of the city, and that's a fantastic job that our staff has done and our community has done of leveraging outside resources to bring in that, because it means that when we have dealt with difficult times, I don't know of any city in the state of Washington, honestly, who's been able to have the number of public projects we have now completed and fully funded under the circumstances that we dealt with. And that's a real testimony to you and to our staff and to the vision that our council had in terms of supporting the policies that you and the city manager developed. So I thank you very much for that. One point that I did want to speak to, which we discussed at the committee level, and I wanted to just kind of bring our colleagues who weren't at the committee on that, was the recommendation of the Capital Facilities Committee to discontinue the Bothell Connector. I think that's an important decision that should be made with outreach to that area, but I think it's the right decision. And we wanted to bring that up because there's a number of things that flow from that decision of what is the alternative then. We had looked at some alternative plans in prior years, and so I think it's something that we as a committee felt was important to bring back, and I just wanted to raise that at the council level and say that that's something that we should get on our agenda, and I'll propose to include on a projected agenda item is removing that. The last item that I wanted to touch on was the same one that Councilmember Evans talked about, which is as a Capital Facilities Committee, we would recommend reaching out right now to our neighboring jurisdictions in Kenmore and Woodinville and asking them about the Aquatic Center and what their level of interest in. And that's something that, if this is adopted, it would incorporate that recommendation. And I think it's the right thing to do because I don't think an aquatic center is something that we as a city can do on our own. But I think it's something that would have a great regional attraction, and I think if we can do it in partnership with our neighboring jurisdictions, it would be a really great amenity to have in our community. And I agree with Councilor Evans; it would be a positive thing. So that's my time.
Great. Who'd like to go next? Councilmember Agnew.
Well, this is going to be protracted. I had a nice talk with the city manager today. We went over most of this. Most of my questions have been answered by some of my colleagues. I, too, think the 39th Street connector should be eliminated. I like the idea of the aquatic center, and I like the idea of going out and reaching out to some of our surrounding agencies. I think the staff did a great job on this. The only thing I didn't see was a little crosswalk in Valhalla. It's so sad. Those people with the ARP cards trying to get across that construction with their little dogs. It just makes me cry sometimes, but maybe we can get there somewhere. Thank you. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Who would like to go next? Councilmember Rio?
Yeah.
All right, you're up.
So in the project worksheets, it always has an O&M budget allocation in there, and I know you guys are working on the next biannual budget, so I was just curious how it's been going with that being in the CFP, and is it being implemented in the development of the general fund operating budget?
It has been added, but we're not balanced yet.
What's
So
that
I'll get
mean?
back to you on that.
Oh, your
We're
budget's
making
not
it.
balanced yet. Okay.
The budget is not balanced yet. We don't have all the figures that we need, so we're still working on that. So I mean, I can't tell you. We as a group, the directors are going to hand something to the city manager. He's going to go through it, and he's going to give a recommendation to you. So I can't tell you exactly what's going to be in it yet, but definitely we have those numbers, and they've been included.
Yeah, I just think it's an important addition to the CFP to have, building this thing costs this much to operate, and I think it's a good addition to our document. It was on there 2 years ago too, but a wise thing to put on there. So just to follow up on the Park at Bothell Landing improvements, I just wanted to echo what Councilmember Evans said about the potentially flipping the priority of what we build first. I think the playground, the existing facilities down there, having that refreshed would be a huge thing for the city to get people to get off their bikes on that trail, or to want to stop and enjoy the downtown. And I just think that it's just the center of the city. It's always has been. And so I'd really like to see that piece of it raised up. So just real quick, the levy does not cover the existing Park at Bothell Landing. It's just the additional pieces, which is parking and a plaza. Is that what was said? And that's what we competed for and didn't get grants for designing. Okay. Yeah, I echo what Councilmember Evans said about the other piece being reprioritized. If the levy doesn't pass, or if it does or not, I think that other portion of it's really important as well as the parking and the plaza area. So then, to the regional aquatic facility, I was on board with that at the committee level as well. But I did notice in the budget it says $7.5 million. And is that just our portion that we assume that we had some partnering cities and they would have $7.5 million each or whatever? That's just our piece of it, because I think they cost more than that.
It's a very speculative number, but the $7.5 million would be for debt service, I'm certain. That wouldn't be, it would be debt service over a certain amount of time. So that number is a few years old, and it hasn't been looked at again, or numbers haven't been attached to that. So along with talking to our neighbors, one of the things, if everybody was in agreement, the different entities, then that would be one of the first things they'd have to obviously do, is find out what kind of expense they were looking at and whether all entities could participate.
And do we have available space somewhere in the city identified for an aquatic center, or would that be something that maybe it's better off in Kenmore or Woodinville? Or Has that been looked at all?
The previous studies have cited it somewhere in Bothell, just given the geographic location between all the entities that would financially participate, and past discussions have focused around the Popkini Stadium, possibly on their parking lot, provided that you could replicate parking that's lost from that parking lot at the stadium.
Okay. Yeah, the school district would be a party to that. So, just so I'm clear, so the whole one-time monies that are set aside, so the 25% towards parks, that would also be capital money for parks. So, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Could we earmark that as a playground equipment replacement as a priority to that, or is that something that's done at the?
Would it be replacement of playground equipment, or would it be new playground equipment?
I would probably shoot towards new playground equipment.
Then yes, you could.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. All right. Good. Yeah, there's really neat advancements in playground equipment, and I have 2 little kids, and there's a lot of really good stuff out there nowadays. I think that is all I had for now. It's my 10 minutes. Thank you. I think you did a good job.
Great.
Thank you. I might have a few more questions in 10 minutes, and I'm wondering if we can break now instead of having to break in the middle of questions, since it's almost break time.
How does everybody feel about that? I'm sorry. How's everybody okay with that? Quick break and then come back?
I guess I'd say I'd be happy to cede Councilmember Sandberg additional time if it would mean that we wouldn't break now. Because I think it's 10 minutes. That would give her 12 or 15. Because I think she's the last. I mean, she's the last. You haven't had any comments.
We can go about how long do you think you have?
It always depends on the back and forth too. So
Right.
I'll be as quick as I can.
Why don't we start and we'll just see how it goes from there.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So some of the things I'm going to say are just comments in terms of when I read the document, thinking about how you can improve the readability and the educational aspect to maybe the general public who is looking at this and trying to understand it, because it is a pretty hefty document. So I'll just start with my questions. And they kind of start towards the beginning and then work towards the end. So in the revenue section on page 62 to 65, that's where you have the verbiage about where the revenue comes from. And in the capital facilities revenue section, you talk about sources of revenue, and one of them is bonding. And I thought it would be appropriate to make mention of the 6320 financing vehicle in that section, because it's an important source of the funding for City Hall, and it's the only source of funding for City Hall. And so I think that's just important for the reader to see that mentioned there, that 63 financing is used because it's not a traditional bond. So I'd like to see just some verbiage added there.
Okay, I believe it might be on the project worksheet, but I don't believe it is under the
just in the verbiage, the description.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I had this similar question that Councilmember Evans had on page 74 about the City Hall lease payments. The text says the lease payments begin at $3 million and trend upward to $3.3 million, but we're planning for $3.5 million right at the outset. And that seems a bit high, that we're planning for $500,000 more than what the lease payment actually is. And it just seems like 1/7 of that being asset replacement and maintenance seems very high to me.
Well, we don't know what the costs are going to be for taking care of that building. So it's kind of a wait and see. We originally had planned for and allocated $3.5 million, and a decision was made to go ahead and leave it in there in order to make sure that we can meet our obligations and that we're setting monies aside. This when we look at the cost of the new building and setting aside monies for asset replacement, once we find out, the CFP is updated every 2 years. So once we get a comfort level, then we can reduce that dollar amount. The money is not, the council has not appropriated that money for anything else. So it's not like if it's not utilized for that purpose, it's not going to be spent that way. And not only that, but in order for it to go into asset replacement, it would have to come back to you at the budget level. So it truly is, at this point, really just an estimate to make sure that we don't allocate the money to something else and then have to pull it back.
Okay, thanks. And is there a way for someone on staff to maybe pull up this agenda packet so we can project the project sheets on the projector, and then I'll just keep on going. But so on page 74 is the project sheet for the City Hall lease, and it says, so when we're looking at estimated project funding, it says one of the line items, which is $500,000 a year, is potential annexation allocation, and in parentheses, facility transfer. What does that mean?
The annexation area, part of the annexation area study, we made sure that there was funding. The AV for the annexation area is 16% of what the city was prior to annex. And we made sure that the current citizens would not be funding 100% of a facility that would be a benefit to the annexation area. So we just made sure that we set aside within that study the 16% of the payment, because that was truly going to be a cost. And it was just looking at the fairness and equitability between all of the different people involved.
Okay. And then another source of funding is the REIT, the real estate excise tax. And I remember previously, I thought we were talking about REIT covering, or not all, or a significant portion of the lease payment. But I see that REIT is not accounted for, or is not counted as secured funding until 2020. And why is that?
Because the city basically used a strategy, a pay-as-you-go strategy, purchase property. As the property sold, we have surplus monies, proceeds from the sale of property. So the first 3 years or 4 years, we anticipate $10.5 million? I think $10.5 million in proceeds from the sale of surplus property, and that is going to make the payment for the first 3 years, 16 through.
So be the first 4 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So so then on page 54 of the agenda packet, which is your summary tables at the beginning, there is a line item that says proceeds from the sale of property. And so we are so we've received 206,000. Which property are we counting on for the $3 million in 2017, the $3 million in 2018, the $3 million in 2019, and the $1.5 million in 2020 and 21? Which properties are we counting on for the sale of that?
Those are the NSD properties that had not been sold at that time.
Do we know what lots those are?
L.
I think that initial $10 million included blocks O, blocks D, blocks E, F, and G, and block L. Block L, of course, closed last month. And so the remaining blocks are the ones, and block A, excuse me, the remaining parcels are the ones that constitute, that comprise the $10 million.
So is L included in the $10 million?
It was initially when we
but we're using the sale of the proceeds from Lot L elsewhere now?
No. I think it was just anticipated to be used as part of, when we described the $10 million, L was included in that. But L has closed since that period of time.
Right. When the monies come in, a lot of times the monies come in prior to when they're used. So this is basically our plan for setting those monies aside because it has a future use. So as the properties are sold, we can't really determine exactly when they're going to be sold, but we are very confident that they will be in before 17, 18. So the monies come in, they go into a reserve, for the facility reserve, and then they get spent as the lease payment comes due until those proceeds from the property are gone. Now, the proceeds from the sale of property could likely be higher than the 10.5 that we anticipated. So, we used a conservative number, but as, AV is going up, the, land is going up. So these are estimates at a point in time.
In the 2013-2019 CFP, in this same table, we had projected proceeds from the sale of the property to be $1 million each in 2017, 2018, and 2019.
That is actually the payment going out. That is, it's the source of that is being used to make the payment. So it's $1 million that the proceeds of property is being spent.
So I looked at this, is that page 54 up there? Yeah, that looked like, no, that's not page 54.
That's the actual expenditures going out. Those are not the revenues. The resources come in and go into fund balance, and then they are actually allocated and appropriated for spending here. So when you look at 2017 for the sale of property, the $3 million, when you see in 17, 18, and 19 the $3 million, that is spending down the proceeds of property.
Okay. When I look on page 54 of the agenda bill, this is the summary of secured funding sources.
Mm-hmm.
And so
the summary of secured funding sources is...
That's the money we're going to get.
That's the money that's going out. It's the money that is actually being expended.
Okay, the money that's being expended.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at the proceeds of the sale of property line,
Mm-hmm.
we are expecting that in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, we're going to be receiving proceeds of in excess of $12 million that is going to in turn go out to pay something.
Yes.
Okay.
The lease payment from the city hall.
But my question is when I look at the same sheet, but for the last CFP, they weren't $3 million. We weren't projecting proceeds from the sale of property being $3 million a year. We were only projecting $1 million.
That's correct, because the strategy changed on how we would pay for the city hall, the lease payments up front. We actually, the proceeds, the money that came in was the same in both years, in both plans. It's the same. It's just how it's being expended. And every 2 years, we reallocate money in the smartest way that we can do in order to make the strongest financial plan that we can achieve. And so basically with the city hall, it looked really, really good for us to show that we had this cash on hand to make payments to anybody who is looking at our bonds. We didn't even have to dip into any of our revenue streams for 3 or 4 years. So it made it a stronger plan, and that's why I reallocated it that way.
Okay. So I guess then looking on that same page, when we're looking at the first line is real estate excise tax. And it says in 2015, what is that 1.1 million represent? That's not representing the amount of REIT we are receiving from this city.
Correct.
It represents the amount of REIT we are using to pay out projects.
Correct.
And what is happening to the rest of the REIT?
part of the monies are going towards things like pavement improvement, those type of things, because those are operating M&O type items within the capital fund. So we have capital programs that are under the direction of the Public Works Director, which has to do with maintenance of parks, maintenance of other pavement that can be considered, that legislation allows us to use those REAP monies for.
So in 2017, for example, in the last CFP, we were expecting to expend $4.1 million in REIT revenues. Now we're only expecting to expend $415,000. So are you telling me the balance of the REIT revenue is going to other non-capital projects? Or are we revising what our REIT revenue actually is going to be?
I think you'll see the monies come through during the budget process, where you'll see the monies going towards pavement improvement and that type of thing. It is a reallocation. When you're looking from one, when you're looking from one plan to the next, it is just an allocation of the monies that provides the best fiscal strategy for the city. As far as real estate excise tax goes, you never want to overestimate that. That's one of the most unstable funding sources that there is. So I'm going to, if I have property proceeds from the sale of property that I'm very confident in, I'm going to show those monies being spent first. Okay? And also, those monies are not as restricted as the real estate excise tax is. So we look at a lot of things before we determine how to allocate those monies. If you want to know how much is going to be left, then that would be part of the budget process that would show the fund balances.
And so I guess when I look at this funding sheet, from this time around versus last time around, I see a huge shift in the way things are being paid, with a lot less emphasis on REIT and a lot more emphasis on the proceeds from the sale of property. But what you just said is that REIT is a lot more restrictive. And so why wouldn't we use REIT for something that we know we're required to pay, like a $3.5 million lease payment, versus using the sale of property, which is not restrictive?
Because real estate excise tax is really not something for the long term that you want to utilize a huge portion of your real estate excise tax for a lease payment. You want those monies available for other projects as they come. You want those monies available for pavement improvement. We don't want our pavement improvement program to be subject to selling property.
I know we're at 8:04, and I just wanted to, just on the point of the REIT, I think it would be helpful to me and to the reader, is when you have like this REIT pie for 2015 and for each year, to know what part of that REIT is going to different projects, because it should all balance out in the document. But as a reader, I don't want to pull out every project sheet and find out how much REIT revenue is going to this project and how much REIT revenue is going to that project.
There actually is a worksheet in here that provides that information. It shows the allocation of each of the sources, the funding sources.
All together in one spot?
Yeah. No.
And then I do have more questions after the break. Well, it is a study session, and this is a $200 million plus document. I'd like to be able to ask some questions.
Could I offer something? So I understand. I mean, I think everybody has an opportunity to ask questions of staff, and I think everybody should have an opportunity to ask questions of staff. I think there are some questions that are kind of foundational about understanding the document, where we all have an opportunity prior to our meetings to review our packets, and if we have foundational questions about our own understanding of the material, to be able to interface with staff, with the city manager, with the finance director. And I understand that myself and Councilor Rayum and Councilor Evans have an advantage in this because we sat through the Capital Facilities Committee meeting, and so I certainly think it's understandable and appropriate that other council members who weren't on that committee might take more time. At the end of the day, though, what this meeting about tonight is what our council ultimately is going to do to act on this document. And so I think it is important that at some point we focus our, if there are proposed changes to the document, it's a planning document, it's not a document that spends any money, it's allocating out our future capital expenditures. Pretty much, I think, I haven't heard a council member say I object to a provision or I want to change a provision in this document. And that, I think, would be something that we, at some point, need to get to tonight, or else we're going to be here for a long time. Because I think it's appropriate that we ask questions, and it's appropriate we have an opportunity to do that. But we also have an opportunity outside of council to ask kind of foundational and understanding questions. And
You're right, and the thing that I've heard is that there seems to be a lot of support for the document, and with an emphasis on the Regional Aquatic Center, it seems like, and so everybody's been very, very, they've had great questions in the allotted time, and I still have not gone, and you're currently, up around 17 minutes.
And I did ask for additional time, but I have other comments. I have questions that are policy related regarding specific projects.
So I guess, are you saying that you're objecting to projects, or you want to add projects, or?
Yes. Okay. Do you need to break? Do we have to break?
We don't have to break.
Okay.
Councilmember Evans?
If I could just add, the capital facilities plan is a comprehensive, detailed document that probably a lot of people, including me and some of these council members, we don't understand this to a real detailed level. That's why we have qualified staff to help us through that. But I appreciate the questions that are coming forward, and if anything, maybe at some point in the future, because it is a huge document to understand, maybe we need to have a specific CFP 101 class, to explain to us how these dollars move around, whatever the case may be, because it is complex. So I appreciate the questions, and I don't know if there's a better way to get the answers to you, whether it's, if they're, but.
I think part of this study session process is not just for us to get our questions answered, but for the public to understand what this document is, because it is a very important document, probably second in line to the biennial budget. And so I can ask all of my questions of staff in the background, and then when we get to the study session go, I have no questions, I already asked them all. Or we can use this as an opportunity as an educational process. And I really don't feel like taking 17 minutes of questions is really that unusual, and that's why I asked for additional time at the beginning.
Well, we did have other agenda items that did not go as long, so we've dedicated additional time to this, as well as what we've gone over. So we have added additional time, and if you're prepared to move forward, we'll do that right now.
Okay. So on page 141, this is the project for the State Road 522 Stage 3 improvements. And this is a sizable project. Its total estimated project costs are over $52 million. And I appreciate that staff has gotten a lot of federal grants for this. But what I'm concerned about is that we have to use, we're allocating $810,000 of local money towards this project. And so I understand that there's a point of leveraging grant money, but then I also want to point out that there's a cost that you have to put out money to leverage grant money, and sometimes that's not always the best decision, especially given that this is a $52 million project, and we're already considering taking off the 39th Avenue connector, which is an $80 million project, because we don't have $52 million. I don't see anywhere in the near future to dedicate to this project. 522 in that section is functional. It's not as beautiful as the new Wayne curve, but it is functional. And I'm also, when I look at the project sheet, I look at 2018, 2019, and 2020, and I'm looking at over $40 million of unsecured funding. So even if we did get a 51% match, like we're averaging for the city, that's still $20 million that we need to come up with if you just use past experience. So what I would suggest is that we move this to the future project list so that we don't allocate our local funds to this at this time. So that's one the one concern I have. And Steve, I see you came to the table. So do you have something to add to that?
522, I think, is on the scale of projects, it's a little bit different than the 39th connector. The 39th connector is a minor arterial, and this is a primary arterial, and it's actually a regional state route. It's a highway of significance, which is kind of rated very highly in the WashDOT scale. It has a lot of cars going through there, and one of the things that we're trying to do with our downtown is make it transit and pedestrian friendly. And one of the things that can help do that is make sure we get business and transit lanes between us and Seattle, which is kind of the goal and has been the goal for this corridor for a long time. To give you a little bit more background on what we are planning here, it is a big construction ticket. But in order to compete well for grant funding, you have to reach a certain point. It's more difficult to get design and right-of-way funds than it is to get construction funds if you're ready for construction. Once you're construction ready, you're sitting probably at the top of the list and you compete very well. $41 million is at one shot is a very large number, and we're not planning on going after it in one shot. We're probably going to phase this project, and we actually have been talking to WashDOT about phasing the project. But in order to phase the project and get that first pot of construction money, you have to have your design and your right-of-way complete. So that's our goal here, is to try to spend some money to get to that point so we can compete well for this regional route. And we can do it in pieces, manageable chunks, not necessarily all in one number. This is a planning document. We put a number here so that you guys are aware of how much it would cost, but in reality, the first 30% of our design is probably going to be how best to cut this project up and proceed. And then we can finish the design in all its pieces. And then we really can't go back to federal funds until about 2016, 17 for 2018, I think it is. So we have this waiting period of about 2 to 3 years. We just want to position ourselves as best as possible. And we realize in order to get this funding, we probably may need to do extraordinary things like go for state appropriations and things like that. But we think the 522 route, because it's a regional route, will compete well for that.
And I don't want to get into the weeds, but a lot of this is right-of-way acquisition, and that area is very tight. And you start to really impinge on the bike path that's already there. And so for an area that's functional already, and as a bus rider, it is functional because there's not a lot of access points in that stretch. So you don't need, it's functioned without its own bus lane for a while. What are you envisioning that right-of-way to encompass? And do we have all of the grant dollars for right-of-way acquisition? You said we have for design and right-of-way.
We believe we have all the grant dollars we need for designing right away, correct. And it doesn't preclude us from, again, finding other sources if we need to. But at this route, for our match money, we get through design and right away for the whole project.
But we still have to put in our
match.
our $800,000,
Yeah,
$800,000 plus.
Our 962 plus Kenmore, whatever the numbers came out to be, yeah.
Okay. All right.
So,
Well, I guess I would like council to think about that.
so I support keeping this project on. I think the Wayne Curve improvements that we put on 522, although they are aesthetically pleasing, were originally driven actually by safety and transit mobility. When we dedicated that, we talked, actually, I think one of the family members was there who had lost their daughter at that curve. While it may be functional, a lot of that roadway isn't safe. And I think a lot of things that we have done along State Route 522 have actually helped and will help to save lives. So I support the improvements that we've already made. I support keeping this in the capital facilities plan as I did at the committee level.
Others support on this, yea or nay? Tom?
I'll definitely support it. It's not a well-lit area, and though it may be functional, we could say that our city hall was functional. I've been to a number of fatalities on that road. It's not well-lit at all. It's not divided. We need to make it as safe as we can possibly make it, and it's huge. If you talk to people, I talked to an anesthesiologist up in the San Juans the other day, and he's from Kenmore. And he said, boy, he wished he lived in Bothell because of all the things we're doing. He said, I live in Kenless. And I took it as a compliment. And I think we need to continue with the improvements that we're making. I think they're the right thing to do.
Councilmember Evans?
Well, it is a large project, but of all large projects, this one probably has the potential for getting funding where many of the other projects don't because of the regional nature of that. And I don't ride the bus through there, so I don't know. And today it may be fine. I don't know how it's going to function over the next 5 or 10 years. But if I'm reading this right, so we're projecting in 2015 to spend $519,000 in real estate excise tax, another $257,000 in 2016. So that's the local source that we're committing right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the benefit of that is the grant award of 2.5, 1.2, 2.1, and 2.4 to 8.2. So it seems like to me the return on investment there is pretty good. And I, we could use that 519 and 257 someplace else, but I'm not sure we would get the dollars we need. And I think this has the potential, as has the rest of our 522 projects, of getting funded. So
you're supporting keeping it in?
I have to. Yeah, I am. I rely on the staff's analysis of this project and the need for it, and so I think it's worth keeping in there.
Councilmember Ayub?
So, since I've been on council, I've served on the East Side Transportation Partnership, and I remember when this came up as something to grant fund, I was like, what's there? Why? I didn't understand why that was such a priority, but it ranked super high, and it wasn't just about Bothell staff. That was about the whole region. Said that project funded. It was, I don't know, was it number one on that round, or was it 2?
Yeah.
So it was up there, and so I would assume it's about the safety concerns. and then also the bus route use. We actually get more traffic on 522 than Highway 99. I found out as being part of Eastside Transportation Partnership, and that's only going to go up over time. So I would rather leave it in here. I think what I heard, Steve, I'm sorry, I don't know what your professional title is. In city engineer? No. I could easily see a legislative earmark for this project that would probably cost us not a dime. So it might not be a bad idea to leave on our CFP.
Well, I wasn't suggesting taking it off. I was suggesting making it a future project. And the reason why is I looked at the dollar tag. It was like roughly $1 million. And in reading this document, I was wondering, what is the plan? What is our plan if this bond levy measure doesn't pass? We've got a lot of projects earmarked in here for if the bond levy does pass, but what is our plan if it doesn't pass? Is it appropriate to have a plan in this capital facilities plan, or just let the chips fall? Because when I look at this project, then I think, okay, well, if the bond measure doesn't pass, then maybe we should be using that $1 million towards one of the significant projects that are funded in the bond. So that's a question I'm asking: does this plan have or need a contingency plan if the Parks and Public Spaces bond doesn't pass?
I don't think this relies on the Parks and Public Spaces levy, the item that we're discussing right now.
No, it doesn't.
So I guess my point is, why don't we resolve the issue that's immediately in front of us and see if there's consensus to move forward on this item, and then we can move on to other items.
At this point, on the 522 Stage 3 project, to keep it where it's at there's consensus to keep it where it's at. So, Councilmember Evans.
Just quickly, I again appreciate what you're saying. I think that decision, depending on what happens after November, we will be sitting down and looking at that, and that doesn't mean that we won't come back to this plan and pull dollars out of this plan for projects that we set as higher priorities. Now, whether or not we can do that, that's what my thinking is.
Okay, so is that what staff's thinking is too? That we might have to revisit this capital facilities plan?
This plan doesn't include any contingency for the levy, and that's a decision we believe is premature to make at this point until we know more information about the levy in November. We do know that if the levy doesn't pass, we don't have a way to fund $42 million worth of important projects.
Can I add one other thing?
Well, maybe just in the interest of the council's time, and we simply respond to questions that they have.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Okay.
We have one other council person who's yet to go, and that would be myself. And I have stopped the clock when others have spoken, and you're at over 25 minutes of time.
Including what I feel is good conversation, but go ahead.
Again, I've given you the when Councilmember Lamb or Agnew or anybody else is, I've stopped your clock, and given you well over nearly 3 times the next person up.
But I think this timekeeping doesn't serve the purpose of a rich discussion.
It also serves the purpose of 1 or 2 individuals hijacking the whole meeting also.
But that's why I went last, so that everybody else could have ample opportunity to ask their questions.
At this point, I think we've been fair. We could ask, we can just go around the table and see how much further we want to continue going on this agenda item, and how much more time we would like to allocate to it, if at all.
Do you know how many more specific project questions you have in here, approximately?
I have some other general comments about the structure of the CFP. And I do have a few additional projects, that I wasn't able to. I didn't have my laptop this week because it's been with the city getting fixed, so I could not email anything, which is what I normally do. But I do, if I will endeavor to get my laptop back and put everything in email format, because this apparently is not the forum for discussion. But I would like to add some other general comments. First of all, the maps. You made the decision in this capital facility plan to combine the projects into a single map. So that's on agenda package page 36. I prefer the way we did it in the last capital facility plan, which was you had a map prior to each section. So there was the transportation map, there was the parks map, you could add in, each one for the utilities map. I think that is a lot easier to read than something like this, because you had the project number and its actual name, and it was very clear. I think that's very useful for something like the North Creek Trail projects that are phased. I think it'd be interesting to the reader to see it's gone through all these different phases. These are the pieces. These are ones that had been completed already. These are the ones that are in this plan. Used to be in the old capital facilities plan, you put a map with every project sheet. Okay, so I would like, instead of putting it all into one map, doing it like you did with the capital facilities plan last time around, which was a map for each section's projects. And then if a project refers to another plan, so for example, the comprehensive sewer plan or the water plan or the 2000 utility phasing, instead of just saying as identified in the sewer plan, which isn't very helpful for the average reader, if you could provide a summary. So for example, on the CFP W1 sheet under status, you listed what the projects were, but in other sort of citywide projects, you just said citywide, like water mains, or citywide this, refer to this comprehensive plan, and that's not helpful for the reader. So I think under status, you can provide more information as opposed to just saying it's someplace else. And then if this document's going to be on the website, I think it's easy enough to put a hyperlink in there. And then when it says water plan, you can hyperlink to the water plan. And then what happens to the other 50% of the one-time revenues?
They would be appropriated at the council's discretion.
Okay. And then I think that's it. Well, there are others, but there are other important questions, but I will cede in the interest of time.
Well, I want to thank council for all their questions that answered many of mine, and staff comments. As questions popped up, your responses answered a lot of those questions that popped up for me. My biggest comment is on the Regional Aquatic Center. Is something I think that we do need to talk to our neighbors about for the future. I think we also need to talk to the school district about it, that they might have properties somewhere where we could locate such a center. Also, I think a key player in this would be the NPRSA as a mechanism either for bonding or more than likely just for bonding, because it does include our other jurisdiction neighbors as well as both unincorporated King and Snohomish County within the school district. So I think that is a great partner to consider in the Regional Aquatic Center. So that being said, I'd just like to poll the council to see if there's about moving, if you want another round or take just a few more minutes and continue on, or what the thoughts are at this point. Councilmember Agnew?
Well, I think we've all had our opportunities to talk for the most part. I haven't heard anybody really say that they don't like the plan, so I think we should just move on.
Okay. Councilmember Evans?
I'm fine with the discussion to this point. It's a plan. It can be changed. It can be added to. It's a good planning document, not a perfect document, but I think it's a good document to work with. I think, having spent a lot of hours on these, I appreciate what the staff's gone through to put these together. So I'm fine with where we're at on the discussion, and I'm ready to have it come back to us at the next meeting for approval.
Okay. Councilmember Sandberg?
How much are you planning on, how much time are you planning on putting on the agenda for next week for the discussion of this?
I would have to ask staff what their plan is.
I'm not sure that we've determined that yet. Probably make that final decision tomorrow based on the discussion this evening.
Well, may I suggest that it's at least 60 minutes? In case there's somebody from the public who wants to come talk. I don't understand why we have to time keep, especially on a study session item. This is our opportunity to get our heads around a complex document and to have our concerns discussed with one another, because it violates the Open Public Meeting Act for me to discuss my concerns with you outside of this meeting and to hear your concerns. So I think we're doing a disservice to continually time keep each other, especially on important documents like this.
Councilmember Ream?
So on the plan, so I did serve on the committee this time around, and I was, I guess, sort of disappointed in the level of involvement I had on the committee. I was hoping to really get in there because I've worked at the staff level, obviously, so I kind of know. So I guess that would just be a suggestion going forward. I would have liked to add more, I think you mentioned a 101 or something like that on capital facilities plans or something for the council members to utilize. But I think also for the committee, I did talk to a couple of committee members that aren't here about what their experience was, how they feel about it, and they just felt like they kind of felt like it was more of a rubber stamp process. I'm not trying to be mean, but that's just the feedback I got when I asked them about it. So it'd just be, I guess, in future cycles, it'd be nice to have, I guess, a little more involvement. I don't know what that really would look like. Obviously, we can't all just be there with you when you're building the capital facilities plan the whole time. It wouldn't work out very well. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then I just kind of want to speak to this whole thing about timekeeping. And, I think some council members have more questions than others, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I understand respecting everybody's time, though, and people wanting to not be here, all night long. But I do think there is a place to be as a council. I know of other councils, they don't have time limits on their agenda. It's just the agenda. And I think we've talked about this before, and I would suggest we go to that point. I think we as a body, if we think one of the council members is taking more time than they should or not, we can raise that issue. But it drives me nuts too to be like, oh, okay, well, you've got 7.5 minutes because she used 2.5 minutes more than she was supposed to, and the agenda item is only supposed to go for 60 minutes. I think it's, especially as the public watching it, I think that's kind of childish in a way. So that's my perspective on the whole timekeeping thing. But anyhow, I don't see a problem bringing this back. It's a capital facilities plan. I do want to ask, I don't know if I can really ask a question since I'm deliberating, but I do think it would be important to probably have a contingency for, I think we can update this in between the 2-year periods if, say, a funding source didn't quite come to fruition. We can do that legally. Okay, getting head nods. So I would hope that would happen, because I think that would probably reprioritize how we're doing the CFP if the levy doesn't pass. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lamb.
So I appreciate the discussion, and I think that there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind about the capital facilities plan. And I think when you look at it in isolation or at one meeting or at one, even at a committee meeting, I think it can lead to a misunderstanding of what the document is. And people are kind of like, well, wait a minute, how did this come here? And I feel like I wasn't part of this. And the reality is the capital facilities plan is a planning document that has existed for many, many years. And so new projects are planned for. We're looking out 7 years ahead of time, and that's the whole point of a planning document. All of the incredible things that we've been able to accomplish in our downtown have only come about because we've looked into the future, and we have said, what would that look like? How can we get funding together? How can we leverage, so we only, Bothell taxpayers only pay 49 cents on the dollar of all their capital projects. That has happened because our staff, working in consultation with our community and with our council, has put this plan together. It's not as if Tammy goes up into an ivory tower and just drops it down and we sit here and rubber stamp it. I think that's only the conception if you haven't been part of the process for many, many years. And it's understandable, but it isn't accurate simply because, and I've had the privilege of serving for many years and being part of many capital facilities plan processes, so I know what's gone into it, and I've had the pleasure of seeing projects that were once a dream and were once something that we as a community came together, like the 522 realignment, now be completed. I had one person ask me with respect to Proposition 1 and downtown funding, they're like, will you tell me this? When you started the 522, that was a fully funded project. And I said, do you know how much was funded when we started 522? Not 1 cent. There wasn't 1 penny of funding for that project. It was something that we, working with our citizens, came together and visioned what would be the right solution for that. And then we went to work together as our community with our partners in the legislature, and now it's a completed project, not only funded but completed. That's why this process works. I'm sympathetic to Councilmember Sandberg. I understand it's frustrating to ask, to feel like you have more to say than you have time for, and I think Councilmember Ames right. It's a balancing act. I don't think we always get it right. I know when I was mayor, I didn't always get it right either. But at some point where every other member of the council agrees on an item, I think you're right. You have a right to speak your piece. You have a right to be heard, and the council has a right to make a decision and move forward. So I appreciate all the questions that have been asked tonight. I appreciate the discussion we had. And mostly, I appreciate the perspective that I've been fortunate enough to have to see where these plans can lead and the exciting things that are in them that we today may say, hey, there's no funding for that in 5 to 10 years can be a completed project that will be of real benefit to our community. So I thank everyone for their participation tonight.
All right. I want to thank everybody for good discussions, and I'll speak to the timekeeping. It's the way that I have to help manage a meeting to keep things fair for everybody. In regards to Open Public Meetings Act and the ability to talk to other council members, I'm quite aware of it, as everybody else is here. There is a difference between sitting down with staff and asking questions about understanding the document itself, and then coming back and being able to ask questions from the presentation and other questions to understand the projects and to have that good discussion. But I think that goes back to Councilmember Evans' CFP 101 time period that we probably should look at having in the future. But as anybody knows, managing meetings is not an easy thing, and you have to use the tools that are available to you. And this is, one of the tools that I choose to use when I run a meeting is to be fair and equitable to everybody with their time, and to try and work within the budgeted time that we have for the meeting. We went for a 1 hour subject. We went over about an hour and a half, and again, it's something I'm just trying to be fair to everybody, and to keep the meeting moving. And if that's wrong, then I apologize. But other than that, that brings us to the end of our agenda. And so, is there anything else?
I'd move to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.